Welcome back to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. My name is Michael Colligan. I rarely ever say that. So here I am, Michael Colligan, with my co host, Gregory Eric. And today we're pleased to be joined by Jon Rud, the Vice President of Sales at Dialight of the Americas. He is an accomplished sales executive with over a decade of experience in the electrical and lighting industries. Currently serving as VP of Sales for the Americas at Dialight, Jon has been with the company since 2012. He held pivotal roles after having started as a regional sales manager. Prior to his current position, he served as the director of sales for the Gulf region for 7 years and the global strategic accounts manager for 2 years. Before joining Dialight, Jon developed his expertise in the electrical industry with business development at Graybar, and previous to that, served as the industrial manager for Border States Electric. A dedicated member of the Green Building Council since 2011, Jon is committed to promoting sustainable building practices and innovative lighting. You can check him out on LinkedIn, or you can go to Dialight's LinkedIn or dialight.com, dialight.com, Greg Eric. But before we go there, we got to keep it easy for a bit here. We got to go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com. The big easy, light made easy.
That's right, and we talk about light. A lot of times we talk about products, but there's also the service that goes along with it and the people behind it. And I don't know a lot of people or any companies better than Keystone at that, providing customer service. Also, lighting layouts. We're going to talk today a little bit about safety and the importance of being able to see what you're doing. That's what lighting's for, right? It's not to save energy. It's not to look cool. Sometimes it is,
Sometimes you
but it's
forget
also
about
to
that.
see what you're doing, right? And so
Sometimes
go
a
back
lot of
to the
people
base.
forget about that, Greg. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
agree.
I
Totally.
mean, the lighting is the nail that the climate change hammer keeps hitting all the time because they can't figure out where to do anything else and have success. So they keep coming back to us. Say, save more energy for us. Save more energy for us. We've had it. We want to do some lighting now. And if you're feeling that way and you have light bulbs in a warehouse, that's right, you got light bulbs in a warehouse or light fixtures in a warehouse, and you got people that sell them over the counter, on the phone, on the internet, on Amazon, wherever you're doing your business, you should be a member of NAIL, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's right. Remember the old tagline where lighting means business? I love that tagline.
Right.
That's right, where lighting means business. That's right. We got training programs, and we got a big event coming up in August where all the cool kids are going to be in St. Paul, Minnesota, August 19th through 21st, I believe, Greg Eric. So go to
Got it.
naild.org to register and to join your association. This is your group. This is how we influence things. naild.org. Jon Rud, welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
So we're gonna talk about safety, but before we get into that, just give me a real quick, and it's not an advertorial for Dialight, but just give us a real quick overview what Dialight's all about.
Yeah, we've been in the lighting business for a long time. I think really 1971 we came out with our first LED product. So we've been in the LED side of things for a long time, not as it pertains to white lighting as it looks right now. But we've been doing what we do now for about 15 years, and it's always been in that industrial and hazardous space. So, global leader for improving sustainability, safety, and operational efficiency for industrial and manufacturing customers, really globally. We try to promote and build the highest efficiency, longest lasting LED technology for those customers.
Got it. So when you're going into a site, are you guys selling safety? Are you selling lighting? Are you selling both? Where are you at?
Yeah, so one of the things that really it's gonna be hard to believe, but one of the things that gets us the most excited really is the safety aspect, because that's the one thing you can really change from a fundamental level at a plant that makes everybody that works there not only safer but more enjoyable. I think the more time you work in a facility and the better you can get around that facility just brings up the morale in addition to your trips and falls and everything else associated to it going down. So the safety
So
side
when you
is a really big one for us.
Yeah, so when you guys look at doing a proposal and talking about the safety aspect, you get into, and it sounds like you might because you said trips and falls and things, but do you get into a little paybacks and say, if you don't have anytime you have an accident in this facility, it costs X amount, and and here's what you can get for payback, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that tie into that, but that risk mitigation is definitely one of the big ones. Not only from your day to day working, but anytime you'd have to work on that lighting. Being in the industrial spaces, a lot of times you're working in, we'll call it adverse conditions, and sometimes over 24/7 operations. So some places will bring a space down, other places will not bring a space down, and depending on how difficult it is to get to that light, may take one or two people. Sometimes a lift and everything that goes along with that as well. So there is risk anytime you go up to change a fixture. So
Yeah.
you've got the labor perspective. You'll have a big savings from that side of it, but that's really only one portion of it. So there's some of the bigger companies have really realized that risk mitigation, have really broke it out to how many injuries they have per year with that, and take that into account.
So when I've done a fair number of lighting projects over the years, and I seldomly hear that OSHA is getting involved or that we need to do this because OSHA said so. Do you see that over and over? And is just a market I'm in, or where are we at with OSHA and their involvement in lighting and forcing people to do things?
No, I think you're right. It's typically if OSHA's getting involved in the conversation, something pretty bad's normally happened. So
Yeah.
we do have that come up on occasion, and it typically needs to be remedied pretty quickly. But most of the time, we're having the conversation points of trying to fix things before they would get to that point.
Yeah, and so I guess give me an example of a time that OSHA has been involved. Like what do they say specifically? Like you must meet 40-foot candles in this, or we're going to shut you down. Is it that strict?
Well, some of it depends on the operation. It's some of the more sensitive operations will actually have a time call out for how soon that fixture needs to be replaced. So from the time of notice, sometimes they'll have 48 hours to get it repaired, just because of the sensitivity of what's going on in that area. A lot of times that's not easy to do because a lot of the places that have that type of contingency have to do scaffolding or some kind of third party involvement. So there's a lot of cost and there's a lot of pressure to do that. So again, if it comes up a couple times, normally that's when we start looking at replacing all the lighting in that entire space versus just doing an MRO one for one project. So it does come
Mhm.
up.
What is I mean, you guys deal with the harsh environment and industry. What's the most difficult application to light with LED?
Oh, it really comes down to the individual location because everybody's
Mhm.
individual situation can be their highest pain point. We've got some applications of our fixtures that they shouldn't be applied in, but and that's just strictly from a warranty perspective. But the customers deemed it worthy enough where they don't care about the warranty. They want something that lasts as long as it possibly can in that condition. And there may be a multitude of reasons that it gets into. It could be high heat, could be really high vibration. There's some places where in steel production, we've got almost sacrificial fixtures. Now, they've wanted to sacrifice them, and 2 years later, they're still working. So, they've become an experiment for us as well. We'll try to get those back and
Yeah.
figure out why they're still alive. But no, it really depends on the situation because everybody's got different harsh conditions. Obviously, anytime you get into a hazardous space, there's a lot of other things that come into play, and you get into a class 1 div 1, whether it's hydrogen or places that use hexane. You've got conditions that can be really bad for not only the environment but especially for the workers. So some of those, eliminating the problem of having to do maintenance on a light in those spaces makes it that much reduces that much exposure that those customers can have in that space.
And so just so we get into a little bit of alphabet soup sometimes on this show, and so for those listening, OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration of the federal government of the United States. So if you didn't know that, that's what they are and that's what they do, and so they probably have some sort of compliance power, I would bet, where they can find people or order them to do things. Am I correct, John?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
You don't want them involved in your life. Let's put it that way. They're kind of like the IRS, right? You want to keep them out of your life.
100%.
How would you
Yeah.
define safety?
Safety for us is really coming down to that individual again. So for us, it's going into a space that may be as simple as poorly lit and
Mm.
making it so that they don't trip and fall over things. Safety from one of the first projects that I got involved in from an LED perspective was really the color increase, the ability to see color, the CRI of the fixture versus the high pressure
Mm.
sodium that they had. They had an individual that got a pretty severe cut, but due to the nature of his skin color and the blood color and the rendering of color, they couldn't tell where he was cut. So they were really, really struggling, and
Yeah.
that was a big safety issue for them. So that was one of the main
Mm.
drivers for them to change everything out right away. So it really comes down to the situational side of safety. For us, risk mitigation we talked on, that's a really big one. The ability for a plane manufacturer to be able to see accurately every color of every wire every day that they go into their facility versus a color shift from a traditional lighting source is really advantageous. Valves, seeing the different colors for the different valve readings within a petrochemical facility, extremely important for those guys as
Mm.
well. So it just really comes down to just the trips and falls and elimination of that as much as possible. Making sure that the lights are on all the time. We got a 10-year warranty. We want to make sure that those things are on for 10 years or more. And that's huge. Risk mitigation plus that worker gets used to that space being illuminated. He knows where everything's at. He doesn't have any of those. We'll call it sudden oops, where something's not working and something happens.
I find that there's a couple different. Oh, I got some feedback there. Maybe it's the mic. Yeah, there we go. The idea like safety, and I'm gonna be. This is get a grip on lighting. It's not interview John and not ask any tough questions. Lighting. So I find safety is kind of a little bit of jargon now. I'm not really sure what people are talking about when they talk about safety. Sustainability is one of these words as well that you really have to define. I like that you use the word risk mitigation. I find that that is more helpful along these lines when you're getting into the specifics. So if you're talking to someone about lighting and you want to talk about how lighting can mitigate some of these risks that you have in your operation, is there a difference in your mind between risk mitigation and safety? And how do you feel about the word? Do you agree with me or not? Let me know.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and I can completely relate to that. Risk mitigation to me is doing everything you can as an employer manufacturer to make sure that your customers have due diligence for everything that they're manufacturing or that they're buying from the manufacturer, where they're taking the employees' health and safety into complete consideration. Every facility is a little bit different on the level of risk and how much you try to mitigate relative to the space. But you look at things that we're doing are not only for safety, but it's really been driven by those end users as well. We've just released some different battery backup capabilities. The battery backup has become a much bigger necessity, need, want for a lot of the end users for us. And I think a lot of it's becoming, that much more aware of their spaces, that much more in tune with the health and safety of their workers. So I think, the safety side from that perspective, they're starting to do a lot more, not only from a day to day, but for those instances that pop up that may be irregular, that they want to try and again make sure that their employees can be 100% back to their homes in one piece. You get power going out in a facility, and there's a bunch of moving equipment, and you don't have any backup lighting or safety lighting. You're really at the risk of which way do you move? Do you not move? And do you wait till somebody finds you? So safety to me is some of that preventative. The other side is, the risk mitigation is, putting a fixture in that will last 10 years or more means you have to go up there that much less to take a look at it. So the safety aspect of it is you don't have to go up there and take a look at it. The other side of it is, whatever it's generating is hopefully creating a safer space as well. And one of the things that's unique, and this isn't just to Dialight, but one of the unique things I think to LED in general, you go into the industrial space especially, you'll have a 100 watt, 150 watt, 250 watt, 400 watt, high pressure sodium or HID. That's what you had. Sometimes space constraints were there where you maybe needed a 400, but you could only put in a 250. Well, for our side of it, you can really tailor that space to what the actual light output should be to make it as safe as possible for working in that area. And sometimes, truthfully, plants change. So now you can kind of tailor the fixtures to what might make that space safe again. What might only needed 10 or 15-foot candles because it was a warehouse. Now it's production. Now you can bring it up to the 30 or 50, whatever you need, without adding the infrastructure.
And you're talking
So it's
about
just,
using controls in that regard, right?
and we can do controls, yeah, and it really depends on the needs of the customer that way too. And we can add some different safety features that are in tune that way as well. Now safety with lighting is strictly obviously visual. So but some of the safety that we can do is somebody steps on a mat, and the light comes on. It could be something as basic as shutting off a machine when somebody enters that space. They turn on the light, and maybe they're supposed to be doing an operation, or maybe they're not supposed to be there. And that same thing can be an attribute to safety.
I just had a conversation with a bunch of engineers and that are working on a rail project in Toronto. Um, and I had to explain to them that the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting does not include safety, which is interesting. And so we were talking about that, and they're like, well, we need to make a safe environment. And I said, that's not really a term used in this parlance because you want to design the system for the task at hand and not for some sort of ambiguous ideas of projecting light away from this property into the forest or into other areas. And I find that's why I like the word risk mitigation better, right? So when you're looking at the task, so if you're designing lighting for the task, you want to be aware of what the risks are for that task, and which is why I like that risk mitigation better. It's more specific and it guides people towards what is it that you need for the people to do this task. And when people talk about safety, oftentimes they get confused what you're talking about, right? What is safety? Well, what I means I can see all the time, right? And sometimes, we have to be careful what we mean by that, and with glare and different types of other things we can do. Is there ever a time where there in the interior environment where there's that electric lights can lead to less safety?
Well, you just mentioned glare. That can be one of them.
Sure.
If you've got a fixture that is of, we'll call it, higher output nature at a lower
Mm,
mounting height, and
sure.
you're walking into that, and it's more at that eye level, yeah, you can catch that. You can also get that if you're not even at eye level, you're working in a very glary environment for any length of time. That could lead to headaches or some kind of
Mm,
eye issue of sorts. And then there's some, you look at like some of the we'll call it chip on board or AC direct LEDs. They've got like a really high flicker rate.
hmm
So with the flicker, that has some adverse conditions that can come along with certain individuals too. So lighting can create issues that way. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah, that's
It's
definitely a thing.
It's definitely, the safety word. I like risk mitigation, John. I'm not sure safety doesn't always
Yeah,
explain it for me. Safety is a feeling.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Safety is just like an all-encompassing term, but if you got risk mitigation, you can define what the risk is and what do we do to reduce that risk.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that. Greg?
Yeah, no, that is nice. I've got a question that all three of us are going to answer here. I've got my answer, so I'm not going to
All
change it
right.
based on this, but um, we'll start with John, and then Mike, you can answer yours. Or no,
Sure.
let's go Mike, then John. I like
All
that
right.
better. Right,
Okay.
I'm going to say, what percent of the facilities that you go in are properly lit right now? Impossible to know, but just what you think when you go into a place. How many times are they actually the lights where they need to be and enough light?
Oh,
Mike,
man. Yeah, I would say
it's a wild
most of
guess,
them
I know.
are now. You mean adequate foot candles or lux or whatever at the work
Yeah,
height?
yeah.
Yeah, I would say there's always the desire for more light, it seems, when you talk to, we want more light, right? But I would say that most of the places that I visit, whether they're legacy or whether they've done LED or whatever, they're adequately lit. There's ample light, yes.
So 90%.
I would say close to 90%, yeah.
All right, John.
Yeah, I'm with Mike on that statement until you get to hazardous locations.
Mm,
And
Yeah.
ironically, the hazardous spaces
it's true.
are not lit nearly as well. A lot of erratic, different lighting
Mm,
sources and different things that have gone on. And truthfully, they've got so many fixtures and they've got a maintenance team, and they can chase those things all the time. So
mm,
I would say that most of them are also traditional. So you get into, like an HID condition where it's at end of life. Now this thing's blue or green, and it's chewing up 400 watts, but it's probably kicking out about 8-foot candles, maybe. Sometimes not even that much. So it does vary. The bigger the facility and more hazardous, and sometimes the hazardous nature um, can make it difficult to work on. You get into a class 1 div 1 space, they've got to take that whole area down, which means that could be shutting down production as well. And then they'll go in there, do a mass relight, and then it's good again, hopefully for a while, unless there's high vibration with an old technology, and those vibration areas normally show up pretty quick. So
Mm.
to me, that's where you run into things falling off a little bit.
Yeah, so you see them more often than not. I was gonna my number was 70%, and it was exactly for that reason. Is a lot, especially the class div rooms. Every time I go in them, they're underlit.
That's
They're
true.
old technology. They're not lit right, and then the hard part is just the cost. To fix it. That's where it's always
That's it.
difficult. But you got to sell it on safety or risk mitigation or how we do that.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, and that's what we all have to
Yeah.
learn as lighting professionals. I think, me personally, and not John. He knows how to do it, but I think we could
No,
all
I
take
wouldn't say
something from
that.
that.
I'm just a sales guy. But no, we try to identify and look at everything. And truthfully, some of those things, as lighting people will pop up and become a bigger thing than they maybe were for the guy across the street. It just depends on
Yeah.
what they've experienced before. And like I said, each plant, it can be the same company, the same things, different locations, and totally different outcomes.
Let me throw this one in there, Greg, just before we move on from the
Yeah.
hazardous locations. How many times have you done an entire factory except the hazardous room because it's too expensive?
Back to
Like,
percentages again.
yeah,
90.
like say like 90%? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just making
I
sure.
will leave that one. I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep that room like this.
Yeah, that's
And
1,500 a fixture per fixture plus
yeah,
labor. Yeah, okay, good luck with that,
right,
bud.
right, right.
Yeah. We got some
Um,
Yeah,
metal
Charlie,
halides in the back. We're
a
going to
little
screw in the
longer
metal
on that one.
halides. Yeah.
right. But on this topic too, in the harsh environments, especially, so they're underlit. They need to be properly lit or whatever it is, or brighter light. You trust layouts because when you look at the layout, like how do you put
Hmm.
light loss factor? It's a grease floor. There's flames shooting up. There's whatever's going on. Can you trust the
Yeah.
layout in these facilities, in this environment?
Hmm.
You That's a great question. You can. Now, we've got great lighting design people, and we'll send them pictures and they'll do light loss. Our fixtures are different where it's hard to get them really dirty, but they will get dirty. If something's shooting up on them, that lens is going to have to be cleaned, or that mitigate or that depreciation is going to be higher than you'd want to have for doing the layout. But a lot of times we've done layouts, and because of that, the space stays brighter longer than what the end user would anticipate. A lot of them will maybe even change their cleaning schedule from once a month to twice a year. And that's again back to the risk mitigation. That helps a little bit too. But it is
Yeah,
tough. It really is tough.
and you bring up another point, is that lens cleaning. So is that something you have a formula or like a spray for? You just say wipe it down with water and a cloth, or I know it's going to depend on the deal, but I've had some interesting things. Like, I'm just going to go off on a little bit, but I've had a paint booth ask if I can do a vapor tight fixture with a peelable clear plastic sheet over it. So instead of wiping
Yeah,
it down, I just peel it off, and then the next one's on. I mean, what do you guys do with
absolutely.
the lenses? How do you handle that?
Oh, we've had that same thing come up too in a very similar situation. So, yeah, for us, now, in reality, it really comes down to, again, the end user and application. But most of the time, because our lens is protected for most of our fixtures, they hang in there way longer than they should for getting cleaned. I mean, I could show you some pictures and you'd cringe a little bit. And the fixture, in one instance, there was a salt extraction location with a pipe leaking above one of our high bays, and the thing was
Mm.
completely encrusted in salt. It was a glowing salt ball. So to clean that one was going to take a little bit more effort, but it was still running and still producing light in that space, but it just had a different aesthetic appearance.
The
Yeah.
if people saw natural resource extraction, like a mine, they would have their minds blown. They should take kids there in high school, like into Northern Ontario, and show them like
Oh,
this is a
100%.
forest that's been cut down, or this is where we take coal. I was in a coal mine in Northern Alberta, and what happened was there was this place where they crushed the coal into into the finer was coking coal, and it was all sold to Japan. So you think about like every week an enormous train, as far as the eye can see, takes coal from Alberta, takes it to the coast and ships it to Japan, every single ounce of it. And you wouldn't believe how many train cars there are on this train. But anyway, they had this giant room, and the guy's like, okay, come on in here, put those hip waders on. So, you know, the fly fishing hip waders. So I put these
Yeah.
on, and we go into this room, and the rocks start coming in the room, and they had all incandescent lights. And the whole room starts to shake like this as the thing crushes up all the rocks and turns it into coking coal or whatever. And the entire room fills up to it's about 4 feet of water or 3 feet of water. And you're standing on a platform, so it goes up to about your mid knees. And then they stop because there's too much water, and then the water drains back down, and then they keep going. And there's like this water. I don't know what light you could put in there other than an incandescent light bulb. And they have to change the light bulbs like every day. Someone's going around changing these, what do you call it, vibration, rough service lamps. So there's a lot of tough applications out there, man, that was the most unsafe. You wanted to die, you go to that mine in Hinton, Alberta. You could die pretty quickly there, I'll tell you that. Get crushed
So
up
is
in
that
a
one of the few
machine.
places that may be a negative reflectance? I mean,
Yes, I
you've
mean
got
the
like
whole place.
really
Like you wouldn't believe how messy this place is, dude. It's like you wouldn't believe it.
yeah,
It's enormous, and it's some natural resource extraction is something to see. Actually, people should see it,
yeah,
not on TV, like in front of them and see it, and it would
yeah.
change the world if more
Well,
people could see it.
How can you
yeah,
see it
and
if
you
you
were
don't
in
have
one
the
of
light
those.
to see, Mike?
Well, you can see the mine, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
over there.
That's one of those locations where they're washing all the product down before it gets shipped out, which is even worse than just a normal mining condition. Because when they bring in all that water, again, the reflectance and just the hazardous nature of everything goes up exponentially. Been through a lot of them. I've never had to put waders on and have water go up to my knees before, so that's a new one.
yeah, you can
Something to
drown
look
in
forward
there.
to.
You can drown in that
Yeah,
room. I'm not kidding you. Like it's and the building's just going back and forth like this around you. I'm like, what the heck? This is like hell. But yeah, they're making coking coal to make steel, so that's what it is. Greg, what about your worst application? Let's go to you. What do you got?
My worst.
The nastiest,
Um,
worst lighting application you've ever been to?
Nothing like what you said. And I would say it was, what did they do? Was it like a foundry? Just I remember big ovens and flames shooting up. That's why I brought that up because they're literally flames shooting up and maybe 10 feet from the light, maybe 5 feet to the ceiling, from this big. I don't know what the hell it was, but that thing. If that helps any, I didn't describe it as good as you, but it was a foundry of some sort, and they had open flames in the facility. I'm like, might keep that one HID for now.
What about you, John?
well, it sounds like Greg's place was using the product from your place to make something, and they're both nasty conditions on both
There
Yeah,
you
sides.
go.
So
probably, yeah.
uh, for ours, it's probably the spots where they do really heavy wash downs continuously. Whether
Mm,
it's chemical and pressure and heat, it's just really hard on everything. Otherwise, yeah, you get into potash. That's really
mm,
aggressive on
sure.
everything. The salt locations are really aggressive on everything. Just from a nasty perspective, I mean, I'm with you on any of the mining. It doesn't matter what the material is; it's just dirty, it's dark, and it's really hard on everything. And to your point, even like concrete plants, everything's
Mm,
vibrates. It's,
sure.
it's just
Yeah.
it's just the nature of it. So that's one of the things where our side, we don't have to worry about a filament breaking. And our
Mm.
fixtures are designed for that high G load continuous. So we normally hold up extremely well in all those locations. It just depends on what else they're doing in that space too. It can be aggressive.
Mm.
But you touched on one thing just briefly, Mike, that is potentially a safety thing as well. You mentioned screw in. So how often have you guys run into where you'll have like a hazardous area and somebody will take what it wasn't originally intended for, whether it's high pressure sodium, incandescent, or HID, and screw in a corn cob or screw in a CFL? Do you guys run into that much?
Yeah,
I
there's a
have.
lot of that, and some of it's, they have those EX39 or E26N bases that prevent the regular E26 from going in,
Yeah.
if they're MP metal halide or whatever. But yeah, sometimes you can just disconnect the ballast and screw in a corn cob, and I wouldn't recommend that.
Right. Yeah, as you're changing what the fixture was originally certified for. So I think one of the biggest puckers I've had to that plant side of it was in a grain processing facility, and it was in the basement. And they changed out every one of their 100-watt incandescent bulbs and put in, and it was Class 2 Div 1, and they put in basically the screw in CFLs into every one of those locations. And I was like, oof. I felt like, okay,
I
I
think
need to
if
probably
it's
get out
running
here.
an A19 and you screw in an LED or a CFL, I think it's certified. I don't think you're changing the certification. On a Class 1 Div 2, Greg, would you be changing the certification if it has an E26 regular base? I don't know about that.
I think most of the time I see them with HID in it,
Yeah,
metal halide or
mostly
high
it's like
pressure
100
coating.
watt metal halide or 150 watt
Yeah,
HPS or something like that.
Yeah,
And then you have to
yeah,
disconnect the ballast, and that's a problem. But I know that Light
yeah,
Efficient Design makes one of those, Greg. You know what I'm talking about?
yeah. I think GE has a cob that is rated for that too, or current or whatever. But yeah,
yeah.
I mean, like I've seen people with CFLs too, and that's the worst I've ever. The actual spiral
Yeah.
CFL and maybe 277-volt and all that. It's crazy.
Right.
So yeah,
They've started on
so,
fire in my house back in the day, so it's kind of worry about those a little bit. But you don't see that as much anymore, thankfully.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure having you on and kind of working through safety and risk mitigation and then telling some of our old campfire stories about lighting. Is there any final thoughts you have for the Get a Grip on Lighting guests before they
You
go to
know,
KeystoneTech.com? Sorry. Go.
Before they
yeah, just don't overlook the lighting. Safety is a figurative term. We'll go with that, but let's risk mitigate your facilities as much as possible. I think the lighting is getting, again, it's starting to ramp up in the spectrum of what end users are focusing on. A lot of that is around I guess, the workplace safety of their employees and anything they do to improve it. So, no, we're here to help with all of those, and yeah, we look forward to having some of the worst case discussions again, and
Yeah.
hopefully resolve them all.
Jon Rud, Vice President of Sales for the Americas at Dialight. Thank you for joining us today. And, I think, Greg, I agree that, in the interior environment, safety is lighting is at the core of this feeling of safety that we were talking about. And I think that's another arrow we can have in our quiver as lighting salespeople is that, hey, have you thought this through? Have you thought about this risk? So it's something new for the energy efficiency era that we seem to be leaving behind us now, John. And of course, guys, go to KeystoneTech.com, the big easy, Greg Eric.
That's right. We talked about the importance of being able to see the light and what you're doing, and that's what Keystone can help with their layouts and all their photometrics, customer service to back all the product they have as well.
Yeah, good customer service. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com. And of course, you got light bulbs in a warehouse, do you? That's right. So you want to join your Crucial Shield, which is the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, where all the cool kids are. And we're going to be in St. Paul, Minnesota, August 19th through 21st. That's the NAILD convention, NAILDCon. Come on down and join us and hang out with all the cool kids. Folks, thank you for listening. You guys make this show. Bye for now.